True help strengthens responsibility, not dependency. When assistance removes a person's need to grow, it quietly becomes harm rather than kindness. This is a difficult truth because helping feels noble, warm, and moral. We are taught from a young age that good people help others, that compassion means stepping in whenever someone struggles. But wisdom asks a deeper question. Does this help awaken strength, or does it replace it? If your help becomes a crutch, you may be relieving discomfort today while creating weakness tomorrow. What looks like generosity on the surface can become a subtle form of control, avoidance, or even fear. Fear of letting someone fail, fear of discomfort, fear of being seen as unkind. Growth requires friction, muscles strengthened by resistance, not by being carried. Character forms through responsibility, not rescue. When you remove the necessity for effort, you also remove the opportunity for transformation. A person who is constantly helped may never meet their own capacity. They learn, unconsciously, that someone else will solve what life demands of them. Over time, this erodes self-trust. They stop asking, "What must I do?" and start asking, "Who will do it for me?" This shift is dangerous not only for them, but also for the one helping. There is a hidden cost to misplaced help. The helper slowly becomes exhausted, resentful, or proud. Exhausted because the burden never ends. Resentful because the other person does not change. Proud because being needed feels like purpose. In this way, dependency feeds both sides. One avoids responsibility, the other avoids letting go. Neither grows. What begins as kindness turns into a silent agreement to stay the same. True help is not comfortable. It does not always look gentle. Sometimes it is a firm boundary. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is saying, "I believe you can handle this," and stepping back. This kind of help respects the other person's inner strength, even when they doubt it themselves. It accepts short-term pain for long-term integrity. It understands that failure is not the enemy, stagnation is. Consider the difference between supporting and carrying. Support means you walk beside someone while they carry their own weight. Carrying means you take the weight from them. Support builds endurance. Carrying builds expectation. When you always intervene, you teach the lesson that effort is optional and consequences are negotiable. Life, however, does not negotiate. It teaches through cause and effect. When you interrupt this process repeatedly, you delay learning. Responsibility is the foundation of dignity. A person who earns their progress stands upright inside themselves. A person who is constantly saved often feels small, even if they pretend otherwise. Deep down, they know they have not paid the price. This creates insecurity, defensiveness, and sometimes arrogance as a mask. By overhelping, you may unintentionally rob someone of their dignity. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. Compassion remains essential. But compassion without wisdom becomes sentimentality. It feels good, but it does not heal. Wise compassion asks, what action helps this person stand on their own feet? Sometimes the answer is guidance, not solutions. Sometimes it is accountability, not comfort. Sometimes it is patience, not intervention. There's also an important mirror here. Often we help excessively because we need to be needed. We attach our worth to being useful, to being the rescuer. Letting someone struggle feels like losing our role. But this is not love. It is attachment. Real care is strong enough to allow discomfort, both theirs and ours. It trusts the process of growth more than the urge to fix. When you step back appropriately, something powerful happens. The other person either rises or reveals that they do not yet want to change. Both outcomes are honest. If they rise, your restraint becomes a gift. If they do not, you gain clarity instead of illusion. You stop investing energy where it is not being matched by effort. This protects your time, your vitality, and your inner balance. Helping that strengthens responsibility is often invisible. There may be no gratitude, no praise, no immediate result. But over time, it produces resilient people. People who can face life without leaning on others to carry them. This is the highest form of service, not to be indispensable, but to become unnecessary. In the end, the question is not, did I help? but did my help make them stronger? If the answer is no, then kindness must be re-examined. True help respects the laws of growth. It encourages effort, accepts struggle, and honors the individual's capacity to rise. Anything less may feel generous, but it quietly teaches weakness. And that is a price too high for both the giver and the receiver. Not all suffering deserves intervention, and this truth is difficult for many people to accept because compassion is often confused with interference. When we see someone struggle, the instinct to step in feels moral, even noble, yet growth has always required friction. Just as muscles strengthen only when resistance is applied, character is formed through pressure, responsibility, and the quiet endurance of difficulty. When struggle is removed too early, the lesson embedded within it is lost, and the person remains unchanged, repeating the same patterns again and again. Suffering becomes meaningful when it reveals consequences. A person who avoids responsibility, discipline, or self-awareness will inevitably meet discomfort. That discomfort is not punishment, it is feedback. It teaches cause and effect. When someone continually makes poor choices and immediately receives rescue, the feedback loop is broken. They learn not wisdom, but true wisdom in offering help does not lie in the volume of assistance we provide or the eagerness with which we extend our hand, but in the careful discernment of when, to whom, and in what manner that help is given. Life constantly presents us with situations where the impulse to assist emerges spontaneously, driven by empathy, compassion, or a sense of moral obligation. Yet, without the guiding framework of discernment, such impulses, however well-intentioned, can have consequences that undermine not only the person we aim to help, but also our own spiritual and emotional equilibrium. When help is offered indiscriminately, it risks becoming a silent drain on our energy, our focus, and the integrity of our values. It can trap us in cycles of overextension, distraction, and misplaced loyalty, ultimately weakening the very foundation upon which a life of purpose and balance is built. Imagine a scenario where one continuously extends aid to individuals who have repeatedly neglected their responsibilities, or who exploit kindness for personal gain. Each act of unconsidered help may feel virtuous at the moment, yet the cumulative effect is a subtle erosion of one's vitality. Energy, both physical and mental, is finite, and the indiscriminate outpouring of it on those unwilling to accept growth or accountability diminishes the capacity to serve in ways that are truly constructive. Over time, this can foster frustration, resentment, or even burnout, leading a person to question their own values or the very act of helping itself. The lesson is profound. Discernment is not coldness or detachment. It is the conscious practice of protecting one's energy while ensuring that generosity produces constructive, meaningful outcomes. Moreover, the moral corruption of values through careless assistance is an often overlooked aspect of unrestrained help. When one continually rescues or supports those who evade responsibility, there is a quiet shift in the moral compass of the helper. What begins as compassion may subtly transform into enabling, where acts of generosity inadvertently reward stagnation, irresponsibility, or even harmful behavior. The ethical integrity of one's actions is compromised when help no longer aligns with the principles of growth, accountability, and personal empowerment. The challenge lies in recognizing that true benevolence is not synonymous with unbridled giving. It is an intentional force that guides others toward their highest potential rather than prolonging dependency or weakness. Discernment in assistance also fosters clarity and alignment with one's life purpose. Time and energy are among the most precious resources a person possesses, and how these are allocated reflects one's priorities and values. By consciously evaluating to whom help should be given, the wise individual ensures that their contributions reinforce the development of strength, resilience, and independence, rather than creating cycles of reliance or complacency. This requires observing not just external circumstances but also the internal disposition of those seeking aid. Are they willing to learn, to struggle, and to take responsibility for their own growth? Or are they merely seeking relief from the consequences of their choices? Helping in alignment with discernment means offering guidance, mentorship, or support only when it catalyzes constructive transformation, rather than temporary comfort that maintains the status quo. It is important to recognize that discernment does not equate to judgment in a rigid or punitive sense. It is not about rejecting suffering or withholding kindness arbitrarily. Rather, it is a conscious acknowledgement of the natural laws of cause and effect in human life. Each struggle has a purpose, and some discomforts are essential teachers. Offering help without understanding this principle risks undermining the very lessons life intends to impart. Wisdom in assistance lies in perceiving the subtle distinction between when intervention nurtures growth and when it inadvertently circumvents essential learning. In essence, discernment in helping is the cultivation of situational intelligence, knowing not only what is needed, but also the consequences of providing it. Another dimension to consider is the internal effect on the helper. The act of giving, when guided by discernment, nourishes the spirit and strengthens one's own character. When help is given with awareness, it becomes a conduit for practicing patience, empathy, and strategic thinking. Conversely, unconsidered aid often produces internal turbulence, anxiety, or moral conflict, as the helper witnesses the repetitive patterns of irresponsibility or ingratitude. This tension can corrode confidence and clarity, leaving the individual drained and uncertain. In contrast, discernment creates a protective space where the helper maintains integrity, reserves energy for meaningful contributions, and cultivates a sense of empowerment rather than exhaustion. The act of helping, therefore, is not simply about the external recipient. It is also an inward practice of self-mastery and conscious choice. Furthermore, discernment in assistance cultivates a form of respect for natural growth. Life's most profound lessons often emerge from challenges that cannot be resolved through external aid alone. By intervening indiscriminately, we risk interrupting the organic process through which individuals develop resilience, problem-solving skills, and a deeper understanding of their circumstances. The intention of help should never be to erase discomfort entirely, but to provide support that amplifies learning, encourages responsibility, and strengthens the capacity for independent action. Discernment ensures that assistance aligns with these principles, preserving the integrity of personal growth while providing a foundation of guidance and support where truly beneficial. In practice, exercising discernment requires the cultivation of observation, patience, and empathy, balanced with clear boundaries. It demands asking critical questions. Is this person receptive to learning? Does my intervention empower them or shield them from consequences they need to face? Am I giving from abundance or from a sense of obligation, guilt, or compulsion? The answers to these questions illuminate whether the act of helping is truly virtuous or whether it carries hidden costs to both the helper and the recipient. Discernment is not a static judgment. It is a dynamic, ongoing practice of assessing context, character, and potential impact. It transforms assistance from a reactive impulse into a mindful strategy for fostering growth, alignment, and ethical coherence. In conclusion, helping without discernment is an act that silently erodes energy, disrupts personal values, and can ultimately hinder the very progress it intends to facilitate. True wisdom in assistance arises when one carefully evaluates the timing, the recipient, and the nature of the support offered. It is an intentional practice rooted in awareness of cause and effect, respect for personal growth, and the preservation of both ethical integrity and personal vitality. By approaching help with discernment, one not only ensures that aid is transformative, rather than enabling, but also cultivates a life of balance, purpose, and aligned generosity. The path of wise assistance is therefore not measured by the quantity of help dispensed, but by its quality, timing, and impact. An art that requires courage, clarity, and the unwavering commitment to uplift without compromising one's own values or energy. In a complex world, the act of compassion carries a weight far greater than its apparent simplicity. Compassion is universally admired, often seen as the highest expression of human kindness. Yet, without the guiding force of clarity, even the most noble intentions can become instruments of harm rather than healing. True compassion is not merely an emotional response. It is a deliberate practice that requires deep understanding, strategic thought, and the careful establishment of boundaries. Without these, the heart's desire to help others can inadvertently enable destructive behavior, perpetuate cycles of irresponsibility, and erode both the integrity of the helper and the growth potential of those receiving aid. The first essential principle in practicing compassionate clarity is understanding the distinction between assistance that fosters growth and assistance that sustains dependency. Many people, driven by empathy, rush to alleviate the immediate suffering of others without considering the long-term consequences. While it may feel virtuous to offer unreserved support, such interventions can unintentionally remove opportunities for the individual to learn resilience, accountability, and self-reliance. Life's challenges often serve as critical teachers, forging character and cultivating inner discipline. By intervening without discernment, we may shield someone from these vital lessons, effectively diminishing their capacity for growth. Compassion, in its purest form, therefore, is not a blanket alleviation of hardship, but a careful orchestration of support that encourages strength, autonomy, and wisdom. Boundaries are an essential component of this form of compassion. Without them, even the most well-meaning actions can cross into the territory of harm. Establishing boundaries is not a rejection of empathy. Rather, it is a method of preserving the integrity of one's energy while maintaining ethical consistency. When we fail to set limits, we risk being consumed by the problems of others, drained physically and emotionally, and drawn into cycles of enabling behavior that contradict our deeper values. Boundaries serve as a compass, guiding compassionate action in a manner that is sustainable, responsible, and aligned with both personal integrity and the highest good of those we aim to help. They transform compassion from an impulsive, potentially chaotic force into a deliberate, effective tool for meaningful impact. Compassion guided by clarity also requires a careful observation of patterns and intentions. It is not enough to respond to suffering. One must assess the context and the behavior surrounding it. Are the individuals seeking help genuinely interested in learning, improving, or evolving? Or are they entrenched in patterns of manipulation, avoidance, or harm toward themselves or others? Without this insight, compassionate acts can unintentionally validate destructive behaviors, reinforce dependency, or empower those who exploit generosity for selfish ends. True clarity demands that compassion be tempered by discernment, wisdom, and a recognition of the subtle dynamics at play in human relationships. It is this nuanced understanding that allows assistance to be transformative rather than merely palliative. Moreover, clarity in compassion is intertwined with the concept of timing. Acts of aid are most effective when they meet the recipient at a point where support can catalyze growth rather than short-circuit it. Offering help prematurely or inappropriately may solve an immediate problem, but can rob individuals of the opportunity to confront their own challenges and develop resilience. Conversely, withholding aid when it can truly empower transformation reflects a deliberate, mindful choice, not cruelty or indifference. Compassion guided by clarity is therefore not a reactive impulse, but a proactive strategy, a mindful calibration of intervention based on insight, timing, and ethical responsibility. It respects both the autonomy of the individual and the natural rhythm of personal development. A further dimension of compassionate clarity lies in its impact on the helper. Offering aid without boundaries or discernment is not only potentially harmful to the recipient, but also corrosive to the integrity and vitality of the giver. Repeated exposure to unrestrained emotional demands can create stress, fatigue, and a sense of moral dissonance. Over time, unchecked compassion can transform from a source of strength into a burden, fostering resentment, burnout, or disillusionment. By grounding acts of kindness in clarity and establishing firm, principled boundaries, the helper maintains equilibrium, sustains energy, and preserves the authenticity of their values. In this way, compassion is not a zero-sum sacrifice, but a harmonious exchange, where the act of helping enhances rather than diminishes both parties. Compassion guided by clarity also involves cultivating awareness of long-term consequences. Every act of assistance carries ripple effects, influencing behavior, expectations, and relationships far beyond the immediate moment. Without mindful consideration, well-intentioned interventions can set precedents that reinforce entitlement, avoidance of responsibility, or maladaptive habits. This is why the principle of clarity is paramount. It transforms compassion from an emotion-driven reaction into a conscious, ethical practice that anticipates outcomes, aligns with deeper principles, and contributes to sustainable growth. The conscious helper recognizes that true benevolence is measured not by short-term relief, but by the cultivation of strength, wisdom, and resilience in those they serve. Furthermore, clarity and compassion demands a deep connection to truth and honesty. To act without clarity is to act in partial illusion, responding to appearances rather than the underlying realities of behavior, character, and circumstance. Genuine compassion embraces truth. It sees the patterns, acknowledges consequences, and communicates honestly with those receiving aid. This may involve difficult conversations, firm guidance, or the refusal to enable harmful behavior. Such acts, though challenging, reflect the highest form of compassion, one that prioritizes long-term growth and ethical alignment over transient comfort or superficial harmony. Compassion without honesty is incomplete. It risks creating a fragile, illusory support that ultimately fails both giver and receiver. In practice, cultivating clarity in compassionate action requires ongoing self-reflection, mindfulness, and a commitment to ethical consistency. It necessitates asking difficult questions. What is the real need behind the request for help? Will my intervention foster strength or dependency? Am I offering support from abundance or from a sense of obligation or fear? These inquiries ensure that compassion remains a conscious choice rather than a reactive impulse, transforming the act of helping into a deliberate exercise in wisdom, restraint, and purposeful action. Ultimately, compassion guided by clarity is a profound form of mastery. It is an understanding that kindness alone is not sufficient. Without discernment, awareness, and boundaries, even the most heartfelt intentions can enable harm. By integrating these principles, one cultivates a practice of generosity that is both ethical and effective, nurturing the growth and resilience of others while preserving one's own integrity and energy. In a world of increasing complexity, this form of compassion is not merely beneficial, it is essential. It teaches that true kindness is not measured by how much we give indiscriminately, but by how wisely, ethically, and purposefully we channel our support, ensuring that each act of compassion elevates rather than diminishes the life it touches.